Hello, this is Discover, and we take customer service very seriously. We know that if you have a question or concern about your credit card, that's a serious matter, and you need to talk to a real person about it. So we offer around-the-clock access to seriously talented representatives in the USA. Again, it's a serious endeavor. The only funny thing about it is Bob. If you call us and Bob answers, you're in for a treat. Get 100% US-based customer service and talk to a real person day or night. Discover. Exceptionally common sense.
It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs, or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. 3. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. This is Elmo, and I'm with my friend Kevin Rice. Hey man, introduce yourself.
Hi, Elmo. So I'm Kevin Rice, as Elmo just said, and I live in Islip, New York, on Long Island, and where I grew up. So that's 50 years now. You know, on and off. I lived in Pittsburgh for over a decade while I was married. But basically, so where I'm from and who I am, and under a forced retirement at the moment. But I was in sales. And before that, I was in security, and before that, I was in home health aid. Basically, whatever easy entry-level jobs that I could get with a college degree, right? And I did pretty good in sales, so the retirement was a little bit more comfortable than it might have been otherwise. But and now we're on lockdown, so it's hard. It would be hard to find work even if I were looking, right? But basically, I have a master's degree education. I don't have the whole degree, but I had all the seminar work and then some in philosophy. And, after I got my bachelor's, at Stony Brook. And so I did my grad studies at a place called Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. So I picked that because it's known for its Catholic orthodoxy. And at the time I was newly reverted to the Catholic faith. I'm still Catholic, and I wanted to go, to the staunch, most orthodox place that I could to get straight dope, right? So that's where I went, and I got married. Was married for about, I guess, until 2015 or 2016. No, 2015, I think. So that would have been like between 12 and 13 years, and moved back to Islip, and so how I keep busy is I keep busy on my Facebook groups. I have several that I created and then I'm the admin of. My favorite is philosophy and religion, because that keeps me. Keeps my thumb on the pulse of the stuff that I love, which is what you love to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I'd like to ask you then do you believe in God, Kevin? The big question.
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
Oh, yes, I do.
Amen.
Yes.
So you said you're a Catholic right now. Does it mean that you believe everything that a normal Catholic believes, or do you have some deviations? Outliers,
Probably.
maybe?
Oh, well, yeah, maybe. For one thing, if I have a departure at all, and I don't think it is a departure, But if there's any departure from, say, Catholic Orthodoxy in me, it's my newly acquired universalism.
Interesting. Using universalism, it means that everybody gets to be saved.
Eventually, not right away. You don't. Everybody doesn't die, no matter how depraved they are, and go right to heaven and be cool.
What do you mean by eventually?
Bumping elbows with Jesus.
What do you mean by eventually?
Well, I believe in a hell that corresponds to what in Catholicism is called purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
So we all get purged of whatever is, whatever it would be between, sort of a barrier between your psyche, your soul, and being able to be perfect love with God, right? Mm-hmm. Anything in you that makes you less than perfect, it would be purged out of you. However, God could do it out of love, but it wouldn't. Just because it's out of love doesn't mean it wouldn't be painful. These things are painful in this life. You know,
but there's no such thing as hell, right? That's what you're saying, as well.
Well, hell in terms of eternal, endless punishment, no.
Okay, so what's the difference between purgatory and hell? If hell isn't eternal, like. Is purgatory hell, but only time limited?
That's kind of what I believe. Yeah, that's kind of what I believe. Yeah, that hell is purgatory. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that what interests me about that specific doctrine, right, is that it seems to be unconsequential. You know, for example, like, and if we're all saved, right, and eventually, even if I'm going to be purged, eventually I'm still going to heaven, like, so I'm gonna enjoy the heck out of life, you know, and be the worst sinner ever, and I'll just get purged in purgatory, and I'll eventually go to heaven anyways.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to, that's, I think, what a lot of people do, right? Right.
But wouldn't that make Christ's death and resurrection irrelevant, or at least unessential?
But no, because the only way anyone gets saved is through that. Right? See? So everyone gets saved, but that's how they get saved. Right?
Yeah, okay. So it's like an enforced vaccine for every citizen, but they're still going to, you know, ignore all the restrictions and the social distancing because, you know, I'm gonna be saved anyways.
Well, if you want, it wouldn't be like that. It would be more like instead of getting vaccinated, I'll just get sick and then get cured, and I'll suffer a lot.
But eventually I'll still get healed anyways because Christ died for me.
God's never going to give up on anyone, but if you want to take the hard road, a lot of people will, right? But it's the hard road. It's not the easy road.
Yeah, I guess I have a lot of Universalist friends as well. But the thing about that though, right? Like, doesn't it make the, you know, Christ coming here and I guess that the part of salvation, its necessity to be shared to other people, it's becomes like a bonus, you know, like living the Christian life, it's just extra because I'm going to be saved anyways.
Well, it's not like it's inconsequential how you live and what you believe. It makes a lot of difference, and once you feel it after, say a person dies, let's say they believe everything I believe, and they say, well, then the heck with being a Christian, I'm just going to get saved anyway, so I'll just live my life however it pleases me and be as selfish as I want to be and enjoy as much as I can in that way, all right? And then die, and then God will just purge me. He'll just have to spend a lot of extra purging on me, right?
Okay, well, I guess that
would be a prescription for misery. A lot of misery, some in this life and a lot in the next life.
Okay, I guess there are cons, but I guess there are also pros there, right? Like it escapes the whole analogy or like of God being this evil deity that throws people in hell for all eternity, right? It escapes that divine comedy, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that critique loses a lot of its teeth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I guess like in terms of, I guess you believe in God and Jesus Christ and the Trinity. Let's talk about the
Right.
problem of evil first. I guess that's really
Sure.
at the essence of why so many people don't believe in God. I meet a lot of
Yeah.
atheists, and mainly that's the thing. Like, we're looking at this universe full of horror and pain and
Yeah.
suffering, and
Seems gratuitous. Yeah.
yeah. So why do you believe in a God? Like, how about
Mm.
you?
Okay. Well, I had a personal encounter. Uh, basically, it was a subjective experience. I didn't have some flesh dude come bump up into my nose. That's not how it was, but it was still a personal encounter within me with Christ. And at the time, I was barely a generic theist, just coming off of a long period of hostile agnosticism, what people would now what they now call atheism, because now it is a little bit more consensus about what atheism is. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically not believing, whereas before it was actively disbelieving and saying something was false, right? That was back in the 90s. There was a little bit less consensus about what atheism was, so I took the name agnostic. But I wasn't just a cool, chilled agnostic. I was hostile. I was what you might call a disangelist, the opposite of an evangelist. I wanted to spread unbelief. I wanted to free
Interesting.
people from the shackles of religion. And so I was hostile. And I was just coming off of that, and I didn't have a path or a theology. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a belief based on an odd experience of an answered prayer when I was desperate that something
Yeah.
was true.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any belief in any kind of organized religion. I didn't believe in the Bible or Christianity, any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this encounter. And
Interesting.
what came to me in this encounter were two things that I simply knew. And I simply knew that the being that I was encountering was not only God, but Jesus
Mm-hmm.
Christ, which was surprised. I didn't know that. But that was not the most important thing and primary thing that I was being told. That was the second thing, and that was what made me a Catholic. The first thing and primary thing I was being told, and it took me a very, very long time to assimilate this, only recently, and that's why I'm a Universalist now, and that is that divine providence is inescapable. It is indefatigable.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get off of God's plan for your life. Nothing you do, nothing you think or try will take you off the track. The track is set. Okay, it includes all of your free decisions. They're still free, but it's all providential, and that means either you have double predestination, or God's going to save everybody. He wants to save everybody, so double predestination doesn't seem to be much of a, like, if I believe that, why would I even care then? Because it'd be more likely, I think, that I'd be damned. I'd be one of the many.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so why bother with it then?
I guess like when I look at that narrative, right, like right now, if I was let's say an agnostic and examining your universalist cosmic story and relationship between God and man, you see this God, he put the humanity at a position where they can decide their own fates. They have their own free will. They can sin and not sin. They can worship God and not worship God. And he's still gonna save them anyways, but there's just all this trash and pain and suffering all in this I guess, like, let's say 20,000 year existence of human beings,
whatever.
possibly, maybe.
Yeah.
So like, so what's the
supposedly it is.
point, if everybody's gonna be saved anyways? Like, why make this dance of humans trying to search to
let's
find
flip that
themselves?
script.
What do you mean?
Let's flip that script, because what is being saved about? Most people, especially since St. Augustine in the fifth century, and especially going past the 9th century, think that being saved means either primarily or exhaustively nothing but escaping eternal torment. But it's something that you're being saved for, not just what you're being saved from. You're being saved for theosis, divinization. It's to become God. It's to become infinite. It's to be fully embedded in the life of the Trinity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's absolute being, consciousness, and bliss right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's well worth it. Well worth
Mm-hmm.
all the cost. So yeah, that is the point.
Mm-hmm. I guess like what you're saying is like the at the end point of this, whole journey of conflict and everything, like where every, like, let's say, like 20 billion humans that have ever existed,
Mhm.
all saved, all united in heaven, or new heaven, new earth, or something, and we're
Yeah,
all going to be, I wouldn't say part of God, but like be fully integrated into the divinity and be
exactly.
God Himself.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's theosis.
Interesting.
It's not that one becomes fully embedded in the essence of God. You want to, but in his activity
Mm-hmm.
of pouring himself out beyond himself into creation, he's going to bring creation back into him,
Mm-hmm.
and make creation and creator one thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, okay. Let's go back a bit, and I want to analyze the personal encounter that you mentioned, or I
Yeah.
guess
Okay.
spiritual one. Let's analyze it epistemologically, because these are things that I am really interested in talking about, because you're someone who's into philosophy and understands the
Mhm.
basics of it, and you
Yeah.
you mentioned it is subjective, right? But
Yes.
why would you rely on it? Because it could be delusion, it could be just something that you came to you from out of your imagination or whatever, uh, or like, why would you believe such an encounter and use it as the basis and foundations of your whole worldview?
Mhm. Well, I can't not believe it, because any possibility of skepticism about it or critical thinking was subverted and overcome by the very
Mm-hmm.
nature of the
What are you
encounter,
saying?
which
It's
was,
purely irrational belief.
mm, well, it's it got past the whole rational irrational distinction
Mm-hmm.
into simply what the experience was, not something of finding out something or figuring something out or inferring something based on some sort of phantasm of the imagination. The experience was of simply knowing those two data that I just mentioned, simply knowing it, right? If you ever simply know something, you just know it, right?
Interesting.
And you can't doubt it. That's what that was like, and that has abided, that has stayed with me.
Okay, but when you say that you simply know something, let's say
Mhm.
I simply know that 1 + 1 = 1, but I would have to say that it is justified for me to believe. Wait, what, that 1 + 1 = 2? I mean, sorry, I made a mistake there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
like,
understood.
yeah, but when you say that you simply know that you had this real personal encounter with Christ Himself,
Mhm.
to me it's just babble or delusion. And, like, how would you
Okay,
be able to convince me
I
that
couldn't.
what you had was real? You
There's
can't.
no, no, there's no way. It's not for anyone else. It was just for me. And I believe it was because of an answer of a prayer. My mother was like Saint Monica to this yours truly's Augustine. My mother had been praying for me for years and years, and I think the prayer got answered.
Interesting. Wow. Hmm. But I guess that in terms of why you believe in God, right? So you have some sort of revelation type of knowledge that came about you. Okay, can you like describe what this specific knowledge is? That, or did it say that it's Christianity that's the right thing, or what kind of, is it the Holy Spirit working in you, and what is it?
How the mechanics of it happened, I'm not privy, right? I was the patient of that, right, not the doctor. But uh, what happened was I simply knew that it was God that was communicating with me, and that he was Jesus Christ, and that I what happened was I had undergone a recent upheaval of my life, and a relationship had ended, and I'd gotten into evicted from my apartment, had to move back in with my mother, and I didn't really have much of a direction in life. I didn't have a college degree at the time, and I was like, am I going to go back to school? If so, for what? Right? And this was quite a while ago. This was, about a quarter of a century ago. We're talking about, right? So Um, so what happened was I'm just going about my day one day and doing chores and getting things done, and suddenly as in the background, the back of my mind, suddenly I'm seeing a life review of my life. And it's, you know how someone, like, if they're drowning, they have their life flash before their eyes in like a second. It was like that, but in slow motion. It took most of a day. And in the background, abiding in the background, was this deep sense of providence that I had not fallen off of the track of God's plan. I thought I had. I thought that God was giving up on me because I had screwed up again, and this was it. He was giving up on me, and there was no more plan for my life. And what came to me was that is not true, and never ever could be. There's no possibility of that. And the one telling me that, to my surprise, was Jesus.
Okay. Okay. Let's say that let's talk about the gospel, because I guess that because of your universalism, you sort of made it obsolete. What is the role of the gospel? Or if everybody's gonna be saved anyway, then why the hell should I evangelize, share it, live the word?
Well, good news, first of all. It's really good news that God loves everyone and is going to save everyone, and it's well worth bringing people on board as soon as they can come on board. Why wait till you're dead and suffering?
Okay. Like, so you're like saying, like, look, here's the beta version, but it's not the real thing yet. But if you want it, then if you like it, I'm just sharing it with you because you can have it right now.
We get to start now. We get to participate in that now without being able to see it, but by faith we can believe it. But we're still really participating in it right now. We're not. It's not the feeling version yet. That's right. It's still. We still haven't got all the. We haven't gotten the chance, but we can still get. Feeling experiences if we. Daily prayer is an amazing thing. Okay. And the more that you interact with God, the more He draws close to you. And you will feel the difference. You will know.
Yeah. But when it comes to that, like, it's very unfalsifiable, right? Like, when you say that, you would know. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
well, it's not.
You could be just delusional, and you wouldn't know because you're not even attempting to falsify it because you accept the fact that it is pure knowledge, right?
Right. Yes, it's just what's given. So,
but how would you escape that?
The bottom line is, if I'm wrong, I'll die a fool. And no one who believes me would be believing the right thing, and no one who disbelieves me would be doing the wrong thing.
And you're falling into like a Pascal's wager now, right? Like, you're saying that, hey, I might be wrong, but I could be right too. And you're looking at the benefits and the advantages and the disadvantages. So is that really the foundation of why you believe in Christ, the Pascal's wager?
No, because like I said, I had that encounter. So any kind of wager situation would be just something that, and I don't use it. Just be using that to speak to someone and say, look, this is something that happened to me, and even if I can't prove it's true, you could give it a shot and see how it goes. And that would be that would be my only use of the wager, just to say, try it. You have nothing to lose.
Okay, let's talk about the meaning of life, because following what you said, right? Like, we're all going to be saved anyways. So why not now? Like, why is God like postponing it? Like, why are we here? Like, why are children still being abused? People dying of cancer and these wars and all these conflict. Why is this still happening if everyone's going to be saved anyways? What are we waiting for?
Well, I think that's a good question. I want to focus on those last few words. The words. What are we waiting for? Because really, it's on us. Okay. It says in 1 Corinthians 15 that He's going to reign. That he will reign. The Son of God will reign until the Father has brought all all of us, all creatures and all people under his feet. I think that what that means is Christ is reigning now, and he's waiting for us all to be in submission to him, all of us. And he's going to wait and wait on us. And he's going to keep giving us grace to help us get there. And however long it takes to get there, that's where it's going to be. So the question is, why haven't we all submitted? Right? When we all have, that's when the new kingdom begins. That's when God will be all in all.
Mm-hmm. But I guess that like it's really unnecessary, right? Like, because when Christ died and got resurrected, there was no need for anything else after, because everyone that in the past and that could have lived in the future and in the present were already saved because of what Christ did and and his resurrection. So I guess it's still a sort of a mystery why there's still this postponement, right? But when you said that it's up to us, I guess, like, so so we're here now after Christ, like, ascended into heaven, and we've spent like 2,000 years already saved human beings, all discovering our potential and all of that, and doing what we can on this earth. To what end? Like, why me right now, let's say I'm a 21 years old, living my life in a 100-year lifespan or less. Like, why am I here? If I kill myself, I'm going to be going to heaven anyways.
Well, I don't think that you really believe that you could do that and have a good time, right? I don't think that you think that that would be better. It definitely contributes to God's glory that we live this life. He made it for that reason, and it is His will that He not impose communion with Him on us, whether we like it or not, but rather that we submit to Him freely and say, yes, it would be good for us to come into communion with perfect love and happiness. That would be better than not.
So there's sort of two things you said there, right? Like, you say that it's bad for God to impose himself on me, and I have to find him for myself, right? And in this
with the help
lifespan.
of his grace, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the second thing was sort of the same, right? Like that I guess that this life is a necessary test for me to be able to it's not going to be a good time, right? If I do that. So why does it have to be a good time? Like, and why? Well, like, because, like, and the first one, right? Like, but the first one is that like, many people are going to die never having heard the gospel, and they're going to wake up in heaven, right? So,
I
like,
don't know.
God sort of imposed himself on them with them having this lifetime.
I really don't know about that. I believe with an abiding conviction about where we all end up. But as for what happens to people who've never heard the gospel, or people who've heard it but didn't really have enough light to believe it, or people who've heard it and believed it and rejected it, I mean, I don't think that it's all the same with all of those classes of people, and I don't know exactly what happens to any of them. We really don't know what happens to any of us, honestly. We're believing what
you're sort of discounting your universalism doctrine, though, right? What? Because when you say that everybody goes to heaven, then that includes those that haven't heard, those that have heard and rejected.
Yeah, eventually.
Eventually, right? So eventually, someone who has never heard the gospel in their whole life, they're eventually going to wake up in heaven, and, hey, you're going to worship me because I gave you that life, and Christ died for you and all of that. So there's still that essence of imposition that you were trying to avoid.
Let me say, I don't think that's true, and I think that's not true because it's it's never at any point imposed. It's always people get the grace that they ask for in whatever way they ask for it. They ask for it, they get it, and they take another step, and they take another step. What I'm saying is, I don't believe death is a barrier, an absolute barrier to continuing that kind of
Interesting.
progress.
So like in purgatory, we could have like we still like find God's glory in our suffering and be while being
Something like that.
purged,
Something like that.
or
Believe I believe that if you ever heard of the doctrine of the harrowing of hell, it's an old Orthodox, trope.
can
Have you
you
ever heard
tell
of
me?
that?
Can you tell me?
Okay, all right. It's in the Orthodox liturgies, and it's in Catholic liturgy too, but it's a little more subdued because Catholicism tends to be more infernalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least traditionally. Um, but there's a belief that, and it's in the creed, that Christ died, was buried, and his soul went to hell and freed the captives there. What I believe is that that didn't happen in time. That happened outside of time, and all souls that ever have been or will be were there, freed with him. Just as we were all drawn into him while he was on the cross. We were all up there with him. We just haven't caught up to that yet, subjectively, in time. But in eternity, we were all up there. We were all there. We all died with him. He went to hell with us, and we rise with him in eternity. That's what happened. But we haven't, in time, we haven't caught up to that, right? In our lifetimes, we haven't subjectively felt that. But that on the eternity scale, that's exactly what happened. Christ emptied
Interesting.
hell.
Mm-hmm.
They call it the harrowing of hell, and it's worth looking into.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I would say that the nature of the impact of Christ's death. Well, I don't know for certain, but I'm just gonna refer to what the Bible says for now, and
Sure.
leave all the hypothesis in the philosophical realm. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. Well, okay. When it comes to ethics, or I guess like we're both Christians here, so like how should we humans or Christians behave in this lifetime, right? Like and is our standard of what is good or bad? Because if I guess you would say that, or okay, let's look at how Christ lived and all of that, but you might refer to something like a conscience, that it's
Sure.
natural inclination, but you would also say that there's sinful nature there. So how would we Christians know what is right and what is wrong, and why we should do it?
Well, I start with the basics. Okay, the basics that Jesus said, which is love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, everything. You're all everything that is you has to be dedicated to loving God, and love your neighbor as much as you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything else, as the rabbis used to say, is just footnotes to that. So you basically live in love every day. You try to love, you do your best to love absolutely everybody. Everybody you meet, you say in your head, silently in your head, while you're looking in their eyes, and whatever they're saying to you and you're saying to them, in your head, you're saying, I love you, and there's not a thing you can do about it. Okay? And if you do that, okay, then all of the commandments, all of the moral theology texts about what to do and what not to do, those are all footnotes that can be helpful. But when they don't help you to do that basic thing, which is love God and everybody else, then you just disregard those because you don't know how to, not because they're wrong, they probably are right, but you don't know how to assimilate them yet. So do the basics, get the basics down, then as you can assimilate the rest.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about what you said about love, right? Let's say that my Christianity, I guess it brings me to vote for abortion, because I would let's say for me, I love my neighbor, which is my friend who was raped, right? And I would want her not to suffer in life. So that's why I would allow for her to have this abortion. What that's from my love. So, but how would I
Right.
know if that's the right thing to do?
Well, I mean, we can all be mistaken about that. You could be mistaken about that. I would disagree that that's the way to go, and I
Mm-hmm.
could be mistaken about that. Where, fundamentally though, since we can all be in error about what's the best way to love, isn't it most important to be loving, right? And then figure out the rest, okay? Because we're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
if we get the first thing wrong, if we don't love, if we're not doing things out of love, if we're doing things out of some kind of, you know, rule consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're still going to make mistakes, but
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do it without love.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that we should be loving, even though we have a only have a vague understanding of what specific love
Sure.
entails, right?
Right. We should always be trying to figure out and understand love better and do better. But start with the love, right? Make sure that you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then insofar as you can assimilate what you and your conscience believe is the best. Say if you think that there's a rule book that's generally reliable, you can
Mm-hmm.
adopt it,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But you're adopting it out of love.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have the Catholic moral theology rule book, so I would say that abortion thing would be a bad idea. And you might have a different rule book. But if we're both agreeing that we do out of love, that's more in the end, in eternity. I believe that's more important.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, back to the question then about love, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
say that love is this vague thing, but we all have to be loving Christians still in our lifetimes. But as a Christian, I personally have my like worldly goals in life. I want to be successful, have a good family. But is it okay for me to have those selfish desires? What, as a Christian, what do you think?
Well, I think a desire is only selfish if you pursue it at the expense of other people's do good. Right? If you owe something to someone else, if you owe someone some honor or obligation, and you forego it just to pursue some desire of your own, some less important thing, not unobliged, that's selfish. But but being the steward of your own good and your own happiness, that's not selfish. That's just how God made us. We're supposed to seek to prosper so that we can help others. All right, and that's not selfish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in terms of that, should I share the gospel? Should my attitude for it be like, oh, I need you to know this because it will determine your eternal fate and in hell or heaven? Or is it like, oh, I have good news for you. You're going to heaven anyways, whether you like it or not. So, but you,
Well, actually, that wouldn't be the way I would pronounce the good news. I would pronounce the good news that God is saving everybody and He loves you. And the best way to get on board with that is right now.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you more specifically about like why you believe in God, other than the personal encounter that you've had with Him. Like,
Yeah.
do you
Okay.
is there any other reason? Let's say like more rationally or philosophically,
Sure.
let's say an atheist came to you, hey, prove to me that at least that your belief in God is not just a delusion or a lie or a
Sure.
religious fallacy.
Sure.
How would you go about that?
Well, I became a Christian because of the encounter, but before that, I was a generic theist because of an answered prayer. But even before that, there was always this sense, even when I was what I guess I think many would now call an atheist. I was not a believer as such. There was still this strong, abiding sense that there was something that, I mean, not that I wanted to call it a god or thought that it was God in any kind of religious sense, but there was more there was more to existence than, what we could see and touch and feel and taste and detect with our instruments. There was something spiritual. There was something transcendent that kept peeking out from behind the curtain, like, the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, and once in a while, winking at us and doing things, right? So I believed that the world is in a state that it's in, not just, and I'm talking about its fundamental state, its beauty, its order, right? That makes any idea of it just being an accident sort of hard to accept. And I never quite accepted that. I never could. I always felt like there was something. I didn't know. As far as I knew, maybe it created it and then dropped dead, right? I didn't know what was going on with that, but I knew that it wasn't an accident. I couldn't believe that it was an accident. There are little fingerprints that
intelligent
say that
design,
more,
basically.
something like that. I would call it teleology, because the intelligent design crowd tends to think of God as this sort of like tinkerer. He comes along later and says, "Oh, I can make that better," right? But I believe in a God that produced everything intelligently, right, from within, and gives it its nature from within, so it doesn't have to come along outside and play with it and mess with it and make it better, right? It's not like that.
Okay, other than, I guess, like seeing purpose in this, I guess, inferred creation that we have,
Sure.
do you have like other reasons why you believe, or is it just that?
Well, I always had that intuition that there was something, and that was confirmed. But then there's my day-to-day walk with God. The most important thing that I think anyone who wants to know whether there's a God can do is to pray as if they did believe it. Because you don't really have anything to lose, all right? And things are going to happen if you do that.
I guess that, like, then it wouldn't, when it comes to that, like, for example, if I was an atheist and you told me that, hey man, just pray to God as if he's real, and you'll
Right.
find out whether or not he is real.
Eventually.
Let's say if I tried it and I didn't feel anything, I attempted my best, but there was nothing. Like, then that would be no reason for me to believe at all, because it
Well,
didn't
I would
work.
say I would say that it's going to work. There's no time limit on how long it's going to take, so just keep it up.
Okay. So when it comes to that, like, you mentioned earlier about that teleology, right? It's seeing purpose in this creation. When it comes to, let's say Genesis, right? What would be your understanding of how we came about? Like, for example, there are those young creationists, but they're also old Earth Christians, but and then we have the global flood and everything. Like, what's your take on that? Like, where have you arrived?
Genesis, the first dozen or so chapters of Genesis is almost like a black box to me. I'm not exactly sure what to take of it as far as its literal content. I think a lot of what in ancient people knew about it is lost. That was the unwritten stuff, the oral traditions, and so they understood things about that just by having been privy to those traditions, so that when they read the text knowing those things. These are things we don't know. They do and we don't. So I'm not convinced that creation took place over the course of 144 hours and then God took a nap. I'm not really convinced that literally happened. I think the first chapter of Genesis is a hymn. It's a song. It has refrains. It has repetitions like a song. It's not meant to be taken as prose, as in prose narrative of facts. It's meant to be. It's more poetic, and it's meant to affirm something in a poetic way.
Metaphorical, like something like that.
Yes. and it has a certain structure where, so like the first 3 days correspond with the second 3 days, first to fourth, second to fifth, third to sixth. There's a pattern there, and so there's a hint in that pattern that, okay, so there are 3 days with no sun, but there's day and night cycle. That's that's a big hint right there that it's not meant to be taken as a literal factual chronology. That it's more of a poem organized around something that already existed, that is a liturgical week. There was already this sense of dedicating a seventh day, right, in a week to God. And so that this narrative is structured around that and is meant to confirm that. It's meant to say, look, we all owe our existence to God. God wasn't something that just happened, and he didn't get made by something else. God made everything. God is the source of everything and the source of us, and he made us with a certain primacy over the rest of creation. Okay, these are things that we can believe very literally.
So, but when it comes to the specific year, I guess time, it's probably more than 1 billion years of, I guess, time span of creating.
Yeah, hard to know. Anything before there were human beings to count it, so it goes back into say a quantum primordial mist, where once there are human beings, sort of like I guess in a quantum physics sense, collapsing the wave by looking at it, suddenly it becomes something that it wasn't before. Before that, it was just a lot of possibilities. So, it's almost weird to even talk about, how many billions of years there were before they were creatures that could observe things, right?
But I guess when it comes to just like basically just, let's say, abiogenesis and then evolution from that to humanity right now, would you say that it took the billions of years for that to occur?
Coulda. Look, I think that, I'm pretty open to looking at the evidence in all sorts of ways, including young Earth ways. I'm not convinced that the young Earthers have the right interpretation of Genesis, so that puts them behind the eight ball in terms of how believable I find their approach to the science, right? But I'm not closed to it. There are weird things that you look at and that from any perspective no one can explain, like dinosaur bones that you crack them open and they have soft tissue. No one has been able to explain that to my satisfaction.
So I guess you're
right?
on the fence about evolution and what specific details occurred in the past.
Right. I'm open to what the science says, but I'm not going to be like, oh, there it is, that's how it was. I don't know. You need a time machine to know for sure. I'll just say like, okay, that sounds
But
like a good model.
like knowing, let's say, you mentioned you believe in universalism and everything like that. I think it is essential, when it comes to what like our history entails. Like, for example, if we did evolve, from pre-human ape-like creatures, then there will be some doctrinal consequences there. For example, like does Adam and Eve actually exist? And what actually occurred in the Garden of Eden and all of that. What would you say that they are just metaphorical, Adam and Eve?
I strongly suspect that there was a primordial couple. I tend to take that rather literally, not in a dogmatic way, not because it couldn't possibly be otherwise, but because I don't think there's enough evidence to deny it. Right? There's also we don't really know what the timetables on this are. So, if there was. Also, we don't know what it means for Adam and Eve to be the first human beings. What was there before? Nothing, or pre-human hominids? What humanizes a living animal body, right? Does so, and how many of these pre-Adamic Homo sapiens say we're there? We don't know any of these details, so we can't really say, oh, the science says that Genesis is a fable. The science doesn't even know how to approach the Genesis narrative. The Genesis narrative is so open to so many different interpretations that all we can do with the science is say, well, this is the best guess we have for now about how to interpret this if we believe it to be true in some sense.
So I guess you're going to take the position that like science just shows us the best model for now, but it doesn't really mean that it is what actually happened in the
Right.
past.
Right, because future science could overturn what we know now, and then future science from that could overturn that.
But I guess like when it comes to what science is telling us right now, like let's say science shows us that there are layers and layers of sediments that show millions of years of erosion and super sedition, and all of that. It does show a huge narrative of that there's no that of like dismantling everything young earthers believe, or a 24-hour creation.
Yeah, they like I said, they're behind the eight ball. They have a lot to overcome, and when it comes to me, I don't even think that their reading of Genesis is very is all that profound. I think it's a little shallow. So that means I don't have their confidence that that's what the Bible is saying, to go back to the science with that, right? They have that and I don't, about their stuff. So their approach to the science has that albatross weighing on it, that it doesn't even seem to have to fit. It doesn't really fit the book of Genesis as I interpret it.
I guess
anyway.
I was asking you all about this because I wanted to know your take on what happened in the Garden of Eden theologically, right? Let's say that there's this. Let's say you say you actually believe in a primordial couple, right? Let's say that in this couple, whether or not the serpent did exist or not exist, or if it was just a spirit, or a form the devil took, or whatever, but this couple were let's say the first human beings, and they were probably very important, let's say patriarchal, and they determined the fate of the human race by their actions.
Yes,
and so
right.
so can you tell me like what happened there when they actually sinned or faltered in a specific event that was essential? Like what happened there? Did they actually gain this something or lose something? What happened there? What do you think?
Well, I'll be speculating then, obviously.
Yeah.
My speculation is actually that Adam is the ultimate source of the oral traditions that became the first chapter of Genesis, and Eve the source of chapters 2 through 3, and maybe 2 through 6 or 7, whatever it is. But the 6th-day creation hymn came from Adam, and I believe it was because he was either already worshiping God once every 7 days, or that revelation was what led him to do that. But it was always bound up in the 7th-day Sabbath structure, right? And Eve came along and was so ashamed of what her and Adam did that the narrative she passed on to her children, and that's us, is hidden behind all sorts of symbolism. So the symbolism of the tree and the fruit and the serpent, and some people seeing some sexual metaphor in there. I think it's all an indication that whatever happened, we're not supposed to know, because the people who knew didn't want to tell us. They only told us that a thing happened, right? But what that was, what that entailed, it would probably appall us.
Mm-hmm. It's a interesting take on it. Okay. But let's say, what about, like, was there anything spiritual that occurred there? Let's say that, when Eve and Adam, they sinned, or made something wrong in the face of God. Like, did their spirit die or something, or
Mhm.
and why did it start this whole, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll tell you, my speculation is this, and it's sheer speculation. It's just because I prefer to have this a thought of something that may have been, rather than a nothing but a question mark. But it's just that. It's just me thinking, well, what if it was this, right? My thought is that humanity, prior to what they call the fall, existed in a sort of enhanced uh, enhanced state of consciousness, something
Mm-hmm.
more psychedelic, but naturally so, right? Uh, so I think that humanity was sort of psychically in tune with all of nature. They, the first humans were like gods, basically, and this was a gift from God that they had to stay in communion with Him to keep, right? It wasn't just given in their nature. Okay, it was something. It had to do with their relationship, and whatever happened, whatever they did, took them out of that relationship, out of the dynamic of that relationship that was keeping them in this immortal God type state. Okay, and so it brought them back into what was given in nature, pure human nature that we have now. So. So what they didn't have anymore, they couldn't pass on to us. They didn't have that grace anymore, so they couldn't pass that on to us. So what they've had to pass on to us was just what we got.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that what you just said, like, paints a whole different narrative now. When I look at it, I guess, like, it's a huge deviation from the basic traditional uh Catholic belief. But okay, let's say. But how about, like, just basic, like, free will?
Yeah.
Do you think that we as human beings could actually determine uh, our own future independent of God's will for us?
Right. Independent only of his, say, declarative and his antecedent will, right? But with his permissive, but there's still his permissive will. There's what God would want for us, knowing that it's the best for us, and there's what God knows that we will do anyway, right? Because He understands us, He knows us. We still, and our free choices are all in that, are all well within what He knows and decrees with His permissive will. Um, so we're still free, and God is still absolutely provident.
But isn't
Um,
is it a permissive will contradictory? Like, even if it is permissive, it's still His will. So
right.
if it's still His will, then it's not our will, when we're just,
Well,
like.
see, that's the difference. You see, if he were a creature, if he were just competing with or ontological space with other creatures, right, then he would be competing with our will, with his. But because he is the source of our will and the source of all of our freedom, then no, it doesn't compete. They're not in the same space.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that it's more like a, I don't know, a panin will, I guess, that, because
Sure.
eh, that our will is just, like, a small part, contingent on God's will. That
Yes.
they don't wouldn't you get, like, a lot of doctrinal problems with that, to say that, human will is part of, essentially part of God's permissive will too?
Well, I've always been something of a Thomist since I
Mm-hmm.
converted. And
Okay.
in Thomism,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
we tend to go with what Thomas Aquinas said about how our powers, the powers of our soul, our intellect and will, are participations in
Hmm.
what God is, and in God's intellect and in God's will. So that's the model that I would draw that from, and that's pretty orthodox.
Yeah, okay, okay. Okay, so uh I would just want to ask you one last question, bro, because we're
Okay.
over an hour of talking now, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's
It
been
really
great.
it really flew.
Yeah, it did. And I guess my last question would be like you're someone who's a Christian, in the Catholic, and thinking about and considering philosophy and religion in your daily life. But I guess, like, for a lot of people, it's irrelevant. It's not
Yeah.
really anything important to think about. They would rather focus on work and other parts
Sure.
of life, right? And or TikTok or whatever. But how would you convince them that this is essential? This is actually something that we have to think about. Because but especially coming from your perspective, that they're all gonna be saved anyways, but
Right.
they might, and if they do
Right. There's no
believe in
threat
God,
hanging over their head.
yeah, but if they do believe in God, they're just going to avoid, let's say, like a million years of purging. Okay, fine.
Right.
But yeah, like from where you are right now, like, how would you tell them that it is important for them to hear the good news and think about all of this stuff that we talk about?
Sure. I would say that if I would just I would I'm going to talk to you like you're that person. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. And what I'm saying to you now then, because you're that person, is if you're content with how things are for now, great. But if you find eventually, and I think you will, that you're not, that there's a fundamental ache within you that none of these things like work and TikTok and porn and whatever else you're doing fills, right? Know that there is something more out there, and that it's seeking after you, and you feeling that is part of that. So reach out to it and try to grab it. Be like the little baby who holds up her little arm saying, "Grab me, pick me up." You can't bring God down except by making him love you, right? By doing that, like that little baby does. The baby can't pull the adult down, but the baby makes daddy come down and pick her up by being lovable. Start with love, and start with asking and seeking, and don't give up when it doesn't work at first. Okay? Don't give up ever. Okay? Never give up.
Well, yeah, I guess just let's never give up and keep asking questions, and I guess that if whatever I guess, like, answer you arrive at least you know that you tried, and like, if you're telling people that like, just be a loving person, be the most loving person that you can be, then I don't think that that would do anything harm to the world, but actually improve the world if everybody became more loving and lovable. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But Kevin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your
Thank
time,
you for
bro.
having me, Elmo.
Been awesome, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs, or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.